Sebastián Mejía, co-founder and CSO of Rappi. I've also been very blessed to work with amazing people. We're both, actually, so the story is like this. We started Grability, and I was living in New York. So I left Colombia when I was 18 years old, 17 years old. And I went to university in Europe, and then I went to New York. And the first 3 years of my life in New York, I was working in finance. And at that moment, my partner, he stayed in Latin America, and he was tinkering with technology. He built a software studio. And one day, out of all places, I was back home in Cali, Colombia, which is like a tiny city, which I love, but it's not a developed place. So we connected there, and we're like, hey, you're doing this, hey, I'm doing that, and we knew each other because we knew each other from school. He went to he was a class above me, and that's where we started, and he had this idea of a product, and I was like, this is really interesting, let's take this global, he had much more experience working with technical talent in Latin America, so it was super complementary to both of us. And we started knowing each other well too, and we realized that we're also very complementary. We're both creative, we're both outgoing. I'm more like on the long-term thinking, strategic side. He's much better than I am on execution and just making reality to happen. And I was very blessed to work with someone like that. And then in Grability, we had one of our early employees there, who was Felipe, and he actually helped us build a product from the ground up. Grability, I remember we started the business, and 3 months later, we had closed the largest retailer in Europe. And we barely had a product, so you could imagine how that was. And he was there with us building it, and then he became also our co-founder in Rappi. So we have a great dynamic between us, and it's a team that we go through work together every day. The biggest challenges are making sure that you have the right people with those shared values in the team. I think if you have them, then the rest falls into place relatively easy. That's why the hiring process is really important. That's why having very clear understanding of what are the values that we represent from the get-go is really, really important. I think it's in that moment where things can be very clear and tight, or things could go sideways. So I think that's where the magic happens, and where it starts, and from there it starts falling to the rest of the organization. So I think over time I started realizing that sometimes we have a lot of biases, and I think it's very important to be aware of what biases you have, because biases make you make wrong decisions. So we have biases, for example, like you naturally have a tendency to like people that are similar to you, and that's a natural bias that every human being has. So in the process of interviewing, and we made a ton of mistakes in hiring, for example, I became very aware of certain biases, so I always have people that interview and test for that, that are completely different than me, that can spot those type of things. So I ask a ton for values. I ask a ton I look for challenges, and I want to see how they overcome those challenges. And those challenges can be from an early days. I want to know how you grew up. I want to know what type of challenges you had when you were growing up, when you were going through university. I want to know what challenges you had at work, how you overcome them. And I also look for a lot of honesty there, because it's not only how they face them, but it's also the openness to say, yeah, I went through something really bad and I made a mistake, which is also super important, to have that honesty. I look also for questions around things that they're not good at or things that they have failed at, you know, and I like to go there a lot, you know. What are you really good at, but especially what are you really bad at? Like, what's your biggest things that you need to improve, or what are the things that you're unable to do, or what are the things that drive you crazy, or things that show another trait of the person. I'm also looking for honesty there, and I believe that people are generally very good at few things, and I don't expect them to be good at the rest. You know, I think we all have our strengths, and that's the way it should be, and we compensate for the things that we're not so good at with the team. Technical questions, of course, you know, around if I'm interviewing for more operational role, like how did you improve certain type of process, you know, and I'm looking there for clarity of thought on what are the drivers to drive a better optimization of a problem. How someone can take a big problem and compartmentalize it in few things. Something that I look for in operational roles. In commercial roles, I'm looking for not only the ability to convince and charisma and ability to actually bring people close to them, but also if that person can run a structured process, if that person has had success before, you know, if that person has reached their quotas, you know, in previous jobs that they've held. I'm looking a lot for passion too, if that person is like a missionary or not, you know, if that person is looking for something short term or more long term. If he just wants to come here for a quick gig and then leave, or he wants to come and just build. I look a lot for capacity of adaptation. I think that's key criteria in any startup, and especially in us. So a person that is flexible, and I test that by seeing if that person has lived in different places, if that person has changed different jobs, if that person has different roles within his previous jobs. Flexibility is crucial. I look for curiosity too. So I wanna see if a person has the ability to learn and is interested in learning and doesn't have just a fixed way of looking at the world. I can come and just, okay, I might be here and have this experience, but I'm willing to actually learn again, because the learning curve in Rappi is huge. I also look a lot for ego. You know, like if someone has a lot of ego, it's a red flag for me. Typically, you see ego in someone that is not very open-minded, that wasn't change his mind, or someone that you can see it in the way he expresses themselves, or maybe those questions that I was asking about vulnerabilities, they don't answer it in the right way, everything is perfect. Ego is one of the biggest enemies, I think, because then the ideas don't win, it's what I think versus what you think, and it creates just a lot of shitty culture. So I try to test for that too. It's a big challenge, especially when you grow that fast and when you grow so decentralized. I think it's important to have a manifesto. It's important to kind of start as many meetings as possible. Like, this is our mission and this is why we're doing it, and just maybe it can be a real routinary meeting, but if you started with, okay, this is the mission, this is the values, this is the why behind what we're doing, you know, that's always good. I think it's also good to talk a lot to the team, to make the team communicate with each other. That helps the culture to be fostered and maintained. Getting people that are not representing the culture out of your business as soon as possible, it's really important, which is it's good for the company, and it's also good for the person that is there not feeding, you know, and that person can have a very successful career somewhere else. I think not doing that can actually hurt your culture. It's not a sprint, right? It has to be like a marathon. It's something that you do every day. It has to be, it cannot feel unnatural. It has to be like walking, right? Like, you gotta always be talking about culture. You always gotta be communicating. The teams have to be communicating with them. And you gotta do that with a lot of consistency. That's also very key. Leaders, talking a lot to the team is us. My partner does that a lot, you know, talking to the team as well. It could be a town hall, or it can be like an office meeting, you know, where you have the opportunity to interact. It has to be also with especially moments where things are not working well, like when maybe someone did something that is against those values and that culture. That can also be taken as a good opportunity to reinforce those messages. And a good crisis, you cannot let it be like just fade away. Like you gotta capitalize on a good crisis, you know. So that's another good opportunity. And then in our case, it's also a lot of traveling. We spend a lot of time on planes, trying to visit the markets, trying to visit the cities, being close to the team, listening a lot, you know, understanding what the challenges are. That's also a good way to drive the culture.